Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock. What's
this
up?
This is extra weird recording night for me because
you're high.
Well, no, that's normal.
Fucking smoking that dank Kush pot shit.
The best part is what you just said sounds very like authentic druggy to me. Because that's how little I know about.
Well, I'm your dealer.
Drugs.
I should know what this stuff is called because I made it up, and I sold you bags of like literal lawn grass, and told you it was pot.
And it would work because I've never smoked pot, so I'd be like, man, this stuff like, I would just assume that I'm like.
Yeah.
The best at taking drugs, be like, man, I can smoke so much of
Dude,
this shit.
Ben, I'm so fucked up, and I'd be like, yeah, because that's very toxic fertilizer. You're huffing right now.
I think I said something on Twitter, but of course, like, so last weekend was this like second part of the awesome double holiday weekend that is Christmas and New Year's. Mm-hmm. And then Sunday, the last day before you go back to your slog of a job for fucking ever, too. I don't know when we get another holiday, but I don't get one off for
I don't get one until the end of March, I don't think.
Yeah. So you're already, like, depressed, and then, like, Sunday afternoon we get this text message from my daughter's daycare, like, oh, by the way, one of the kids that was at class on Wednesday went home sick that day, and they just tested positive for COVID. And then, like, a couple hours later, we get a text. It's like, oh, one of her teachers also. And, like, her specific class, not just, like,
You're just
at the
getting
school.
that text, like, every 2 seconds. And her, and him, and him, and her, and her, and him, and him, and her. I was like, okay, well, then it's here. We are all become COVID.
And so, like, there, of course, the part of that is, of course, the first part is like, well, shit. I don't want my daughter to have COVID. Although when you have to have her in daycare like we do, it's one of these like
you don't
feels
have
like
to.
A foregone conclusion. Well,
you could
no,
like,
yeah.
You
if
could
I want to like,
you could just like hand her like a knife and tell her to go build a dugout in the woods.
That's true.
And
she's 2.5. That half, that's the maturity part.
At what point do you start putting this kid in a position where she can be self-reliant?
So anyway, we have to quarantine her and ideally we'd all quarantine, but because where me and Tara work, we work together and we're the only two there. So if we all quarantine, it's not open, and that's just not, it doesn't function.
I mean, see any fucking news article right now. That is the constant argument happening where it's like, everything with COVID is just like, well, we didn't solve the problem, but you got to go back to work.
Yeah. Well, and in my case, and it's not like some evil fucking corporate's making us go. It's our business, and it's kind of an essential business. It's insurance. If I'm not trying to keep it secret, I've talked about it before. But it's something people need, and they need to have access to stuff. And it's something that we can go and still be relatively, like, distanced. Yeah. But long story short, one of us has had to stay home with her all week, and it's been Tara all week until today, and she had some stuff to do. So I was like, well, I'll stay home today. But that really fucks me up for the podcast because, like, I've been sitting on my ass basically doing nothing, watching my daughter, but that's not, like, that's a chore if you're babysitting somebody else's kid. When it's your kid, that's just life. So it's really not that much different than just sitting on my ass.
I mean, don't worry about it too much. We were late posting last week's episode because I had a grand total of 2 things happen last weekend, and apparently more than one thing is enough to make me forget I even do a podcast every week.
And I'm very happy, like, letting you take the blame for it being a day late, even though you had it on time, and it was actually, I've been so fucking slammed at work the days I there, partly because I was there by myself, partly because it's the first of the month.
But it's easier
I could have had it up on time.
But it's easier for you to get it set up if I'm not, like, I got it to you at like 10 p.m. your time the night before. Like, I knew it was probably not getting posted until later, but
under normal circumstances it would have, but anyway. So yeah, that's us bitching and moaning about, like,
it's
doing
such a hard job
that we voluntarily do for no reason.
It's such a hard job that I even half-assed this week because I couldn't get a real topic together. So I grabbed a creepypasta. If you don't know this show, by the way, we tell each other stories every week. And usually they're supposed to be not this, where I cop out and grab creepypastas. But at least half the time they are that.
Yeah.
And this is one of those times. But I got really excited just before the show because I grabbed one completely at random last night. And then I realized this one, just before we started recording, was done by Shadow Swimmer 77.
That sounds very familiar.
If that sounds familiar to you, go to episode 134. I lost my fucking mind. So we'll see how it goes. But that was a story that Steve brought, and I got very fucking annoyed.
Yeah, and I can't remember if that's because there's two of them that come to mind when you said that. There's the one where it was about like the road.
It was about driving. It was about roads.
Yeah, okay. There was that one, and then the only one that I think pissed you off more than that one was the dog one, like the Hounds of November or whatever, the Wolves of November.
Was that the one with the fucking coyotes or whatever of Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
I don't know how like genuinely mad at that one I was. I just thought it was really silly.
Anyway, so and Shadow Swimmer might have been the one person that like responded to us on Twitter the one time too.
Friend of the show. Shadow Swimmer.
Well, here's your second chance, Shadow Swimmer.
Here's the thing, though. I'm a big asshole, so I felt really bad after that last one. Because it wasn't like he was like technically a bad writer. I just thought the pacing for that story was really frustrating.
We're falling into that trap again too. We keep saying he, but we still don't necessarily know that. Yeah,
sorry to assume genders. All I know is that you're a better writer than me, so.
Right, and I guess we can normally we say this at the end of our creepypastas, but when we point stuff out, we'll pick things apart from like a literary or a story perspective or writing perspective. We're not doing it to make fun of the writers. Yeah. If you're not familiar with creepypastas, they're not really a genre that's meant to be like.
We're not reading Edgar Allan Poe here. This is
well, and theoretically we could be reading Edgar Allan Poe, but we're not reading
some
his
bullshit
published.
Too.
Right, right. Because some of these people, maybe who knows what they've written.
Maybe that's on the table. Maybe we should bring some real fucking like classic horror writings on here to really shit on them.
I'm sensing a game show, but I don't know how we get it to fit. Where you read a passage and then you have to guess if it's creepypasta or like classic horror.
That's a good idea. I keep that in your pocket because that might be all right for a show. But not this one. This one we're going to read his story, he or she's story, their story. God, I suck at that. The Legend of Old Mother Cleaver. Not old. It's like old-timey.
Like the Leave It to Beaver lady, or?
Is Mother Cleaver a Leave It to Beaver thing?
Cleaver was their last name.
Mother Beaver.
Last name, yeah.
Leave It to Cleaver.
Yeah, so the kid's name was Beaver Cleaver, so...
Okay.
It sounds like a porn star name, now that I think about it.
It sounds like a porn video comment section username.
Anyway.
So,
old Mrs. Cleaver.
So if you ever see Beaver Cleaver on your favorite porn site, hit me up. Ask how I'm doing in the DMs. This is a true story. I know that's cliche to say. In this day and age, claiming something incredible happened without video proof is a surefire way to make sure certain people won't believe you. Everyone does it, though, especially in the realm of the scary and the supernatural. Movies like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Strangers are supposedly based on true stories. But when you take a look at the events inspiring them, you'll find an excessive amount of artistic license has gone into the end product. The result, many times, is that the tale told becomes hardly recognizable from its source material. I guess the writers and directors figure reality isn't scary enough. The story I'm about to relate happened, though, just the way I'm telling it. No embellishment needed. I wouldn't lie about that because, well, you'll see. I
kind of, like, thinking back to the other story, believe the no embellishment part.
I believe we will hear every realistic detail And we will finish this story up in about a week. I grew up in a different world than today. The internet wasn't commercialized yet, phones were still attached to the wall, and kids played outside on afternoons and weekends. I like that he says that they say that the internet wasn't commercialized yet, because that was probably about a 2-minute period at the beginning of the internet.
Yeah,
and then somebody was like, what if we put a banner there?
Yeah, I remember that time, though. I mean, the internet exists. I was going to say, I kind of actually like that phrase because it's easy to be like, oh, I grew up before the internet. And technically, I didn't. I think the internet, like, as a system, was set up in the late 70s, maybe.
Yeah. But that was like two scientists sending each other, like, butt pics back and forth and be like, hey, you get that? Yeah, lol.
Yeah, and for, like, the first decade of my childhood, it was, like, 3 universities that could talk to each other sending butt pics. But so I get what that it meant by the phrase.
Yeah.
But what I hate is that cop out, and I get it, like using it for flavor or whatever. But people actually, like, I hear it all the fucking time. Well, we actually played outside as kids. I live in a neighborhood. Kids still fucking play outside. I wish they wouldn't. They're loud.
Yeah. You went even like further curmudgeon-y.
Yeah.
Back in my day, kids didn't have anything to do but hide inside.
Well, we played outside, but we did it quietly and respectfully. No, we didn't. We were monsters, but...
Yeah. The information age is marvelous, an incredible amount of knowledge available instantaneously at our fingertips. Questions that in my youth would have taken days of research at the library to answer are satisfied in moments with a quick Google search. The issue, I found, is having access to such a font of knowledge has made us lazy. We assume incorrectly that we can find anything online. If there's nothing there, if the search results come up empty, it must either be unimportant or simply not exist. That's not true. Some things, some very real, very important things, have avoided making the digital leap. Things like Old Mother Cleaver. Yet I found this story online. So
I don't know. He's talking
found
about
a contradiction.
He's talking about things not being on the internet, and I'm having PTSD, like thinking about buying Dark Souls at its original launch when there were no walkthroughs or anything yet.
Yeah.
Anything you can't find online is a nightmare.
Yeah. My mom and I moved to a new town a couple weeks after my 13th birthday. My dad was in the Army, and eventually Mom got tired of pulling up her life and starting over every couple of years. My parents decided to try a trial separation and jointly concluded I would go with Mom since Dad's lifestyle wouldn't be ideal for raising a kid by himself. I didn't get to have much of an opinion in the matter, so that was that. My mom wanted to live somewhere where we could put down roots. She said she was looking for a place that embodied pure Americana, small town living but close enough to a big city that you could catch a flight if the itch to travel caught you. And that's where we ended up, a little town in Pennsylvania not far from Pittsburgh. I'm not going to say exactly where because, well, then I'd consider myself responsible for anything that might happen to anyone looking to corroborate my story. Just think of It's a Wonderful Life, and that'll give you a pretty good idea. It was summer when we arrived, a particularly hot one, and I remember flies the size of gumballs flitting through air that seemed hazy because of the heat. Mom got a job.
I can't picture a gumball-sized fly flitting. I'm sure you get those fuckers, like the horse flies and stuff up in Washington.
We don't have horses. We're not allowed.
Horse flies they're huge and they don't flit. They'll like run into you like a bullet bill or something.
They'll bump into you.
They just
pardon me.
Yeah.
Mind if I bite? Mom got a job as a secretary for the judge at the town courthouse. She worked long hours, and since I wouldn't be starting school until the end of August, I was left to my own devices from pretty much sunup to sundown. The little 2-bedroom duplex she could afford on her salary, even supplemented with monthly checks from my dad, was cozy but didn't have air conditioning, minus a few ceiling fans that didn't do much to cool you off. Accordingly, I spent most of my days wandering around town to take my mind off the heat. That was how I came to meet Tom and Terry, which I thought for a second said Tom and Jerry. I was like, cat and mouse? Awesome. Siblings who, for that summer, became my best friends in the whole world. They were Irish twins, Terry being my age and Tom slightly older. Tom was gregarious and energetic. Terry was more reserved and bookish. But despite their differences, they shared curly brown hair, emerald green eyes, and a tight-knit bond. Even though we were on a pretty meager budget, my mom gave me a couple dollars a week in allowance that I would generally blow at the old-fashioned soda shop downtown. I first ran into the brothers at the store's comic rack, and we bonded over the latest issue of Uncanny X-Men and chocolate milkshakes. Eventually, we realized we only lived a couple blocks apart from each other. From that first meeting on, we were nigh
So it's a real meet cute. Yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
So it's a real meet cute.
Yeah.
X-Men and milkshakes. And
yeah. Back in my day, we had X-Men and milkshakes. You can't find them now.
Not without Googling him.
Not without. I have to download my milkshakes off the internet. Tom and Terry were in a similar situation to me. Their mom had died a couple years earlier, and their dad worked the night shift at the paper mill just outside town. Most mornings I would take my old 10-speed over to their house where we would meet up and head out for the day. The two of them had lived there since they'd been born, so they were able to show me all the interesting things there were for kids to do in town and throughout the surrounding area. If nothing out of the ordinary had happened that summer, I'd still remember it as clearly as I do now from all the memories I built with Terry and Tom. Every day was an adventure. Bike races down Breakneck Hill, cannonballs in the swimming hole out in the East Woods, catching fireflies in the twilight gloom, and many others. Looking back now, I recognize the first part of that summer composed the framework to a kind of youthful Eden. That's a good sentence. I like that.
I just like the term youthful Eden. It sounds like it sounds like a 90s kind of almost Smashing Pumpkins type band.
Well, now I hate it.
Yeah.
Because I hate Smashing Pumpkins.
Well, then you'll hate Youthful Eden because they're the same genre.
I was going to try to extend an olive branch to Smashing Pumpkins, but I can't do it. I don't like them. I hate that. I haven't heard one song of theirs I thought was good.
You young kids today don't know what good music is.
Yeah. Occasionally we would have sleepovers. The brothers' house stood on the edge of their neighborhood, and they had a large backyard bordered by thick, leafy woods. The oppressive heat thankfully gave a reprieve. God, I suck. Most days after the sun went down, so some nights we'd build a bonfire and pile sleeping bags into the tent Tom had still had from 6 months in the Boy Scouts. It was on one of those evenings, about 2 months after I had moved to town, toasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories, that I was introduced to the legend of Old Mother Cleaver. "You don't know about Mum Cleaver?" Tom asked with a grin, firelight reflecting off his teeth.
I thought it was Old Mother Cleaver. Now it's Mum Cleaver?
It's Mum Cleaver. You ever heard of Mum Cleaver? Dipshit.
Yeah, and I pictured it said just like that, too. Although that's not like the Pennsylvania accent. I can't do a Pennsylvania accent to save my life, even though I live there.
Well, it's like you either go deep south when they say mum, or you go fucking British. It's like
Old Mama Cleaver. That wasn't British. I don't know what the fuck that was.
That's like a Hogwarts British. I shook my head. What, is she some kind of urban legend, like the Hook or Bloody Mary or something? Or some, Terry murmured. Tom laughed. Nah, nothing like those little kiddie stories. The Cleaves is real.
Yeah, so
they actually wrote that. That's awesome. The Cleaves is real, bitch.
Yeah, Tom and Terry grew up their whole lives in Pennsylvania by way of Missouri, it sounds like, or Mississippi. But
Missouri, but
I'll take
Cleaves.
I mean, in fairness, Pennsylvania is very, rural Pennsylvania and rural Ohio are very similar. And that is exactly how I picture us talking, even though I currently live here and,
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's what most urban legends want you to believe. If she's so real, how come I've never heard of her? Tom shrugged. Probably because she's local. But she's definitely real. Our dad told us the story about her one time when he got super drunk, and he only tells the truth when he's drunk, much to our chagrin. No, our dad told us the story about her one time when he got super drunk. A long time ago, there was this lady that lived in a little house out in the woods with her son. Everyone in town knew she was supposed to be a witch, but because they would go to her for love potions and to help deliver babies, they pretty much just ignored it. Really? A witch? Shut up. That's what my dad said. Anyway, the mayor's wife was having a baby, but she died giving birth. The mayor said it must have been something the witch did and got everyone in town all worked up. A bunch of people went out to her house and burned it down. I rolled my eyes and speared another marshmallow. And now the witch's ghost haunts the town, right? No, Mr. Smarty Pants. The witch wasn't home. My dad figures she must have been pretty upset about the mayor's wife and was wandering in the town when the crowd got there. The only one in the house was her son. And he... Tom nodded somberly. My dad said the witch promised she'd have justice for her son's murder, but since the one most...
I like that they try to burn her alive, and then when they find out that she's still alive and she's swearing vengeance, they're like, well, we're not going to just actively murder her. Like, we were only going to do it secretly. Like,
well, you get one shot with the angry mob thing. Otherwise, you're a Simpsons joke, you know? It's like, if you can't kill her the first try, you don't get to make a new mob. You fucked up, you failed. Wait till the next generation to get mad at one person in your town.
The mayor comes busting in. Hey, fellas, we missed her, but she's right here swearing vengeance. And they're all like, yeah, but up. It's Sunday and football's on. Yeah. The Eagles are playing.
Eagles versus Steelers. Woo.
So, yeah, we're not missing that. Like, yeah, sorry.
All right. But since the one mostly responsible was the mayor, she didn't trust the courts would find him guilty. So she took the cleaver she used to cut up the ingredients for her potions and went into town. She used a spell to find out who had burned her house and night by night snuck into their rooms and hid under their beds. While they were sleeping, she crept out and used her magic to make her voice sound like their mother's. She confronted them with what they did, then listened to what they said while they were only half awake. If they were honest and admitted to the killing, she gave them a kiss on the forehead and left. But if they lied, she took her cleaver and chopped off their heads. I rolled my eyes. That's pretty unbelievable.
I like that it's very similar to the old-timey like witch like tests though, like because had they not actually burned their house, you would say that you didn't burn their house, and then the witch would think that they're lying and kill it. Like, so if you're innocent, you're fucked. Like, it's the one test. Unless you're innocent, but you were, like, having a dream that you did it, so you, like, confessed even though you didn't do it. But, like... And I get that it said that the magic told her who, like, whatever, theoretically, but, you know.
Yeah. I will say, as a witch plot, this is a very, like, kind of grounded, like... Not, like, the witch is believable, but this is a believable urban legend to me.
Oh, yeah. We still see it to this day, just maybe not to the extreme of, like, a mob burning a house down.
Yeah.
Although that wouldn't shock me to read that in the paper tomorrow, but...
I feel like, though, if she was, like, there with a fucking big knife, she wouldn't need, like, magic to be like, did you burn down my house? And then... like, she wouldn't need to put them in a trance or pretend to be their mother or some shit. She could just, like, you know... She already knows who's lying, so...
Well, that's the thing. See, she was a single witch mom.
Hot single witch mom in your area.
She got knocked up, like, at her first year at Hogwarts or wherever witches actually go, and had to drop out of school. So she only had a select number of spells.
I wouldn't make you drop out in Hogwarts for that. They would do fucked up shit. Like, but... Alright. Take a drink of water, because I need one. They didn't realize it was the witch killing people. Why didn't they get another crowd together and burn her at the stake? Why did the witch give them a chance to confess instead of killing all of them? Tom shrugged again. Look, that's just what my dad told us. Anyway, the rest of the story is once she visited all her son's killers, she disappeared. But every once in a while there will be a strange death around town, and people will say old Mother Cleaver must have caught them in a lie. Terry spoke up. Parents around here say if you're bad and don't listen, then old Mum will get you. Everyone around here knows about her, mostly because of the rhyme.
Don't you love that whenever there's a killer, like, creature on the loose, parents use it as, like, a tool against their children?
And they make a cute little song about it. Rhyme like Freddy Krueger? Sort of. I haven't said it in forever. Terry shut his eyes in concentration, trying to remember the words. Then he began to chant in a slow, sing-song voice. Old Mother Cleaver, you won't see her hiding beneath your bed. While you are sleeping, she will be sneaking out to cut off your head. Grinning, Tom joined in. Bad little boys and girls who are wicked to the world best say their prayers at night, 'cause those who steal and lie will have a big surprise when they turn off the light. Their voices picked up in tempo. If Mother asks you, you had best be true, answering from your bed, else she'll take her big, shiny cleaver, one chop and you'll be dead. Abruptly,
I've got issues with that. Like,
not very. It's a hard one to put into a tune. To be fair, it's written all in one line, so I might be breaking it up wrong, but split it up. I tried to do it in the fucking rhyme thing that Willy Wonka does. If you ever need to put a rhyme together for your story, that's a perfect rhythm for a scary, eerie thing. Abruptly, the rhyme ended. The brothers fell quiet, and for several moments, the only sound was the snapping of the logs on the fire. I cleared my throat, breaking the silence. Well, that's definitely creepy, but I still don't believe it. You don't have to, Tom laughed, because if you lie, the Cleaves will chop your head off either way. No way, I shouted, because if she tried, I'd give her one of these. I jumped up and tackled him. We rolled around in the grass, laughing uproariously. Uh-oh, Sammy boy. Fighting's against the rules. Old Mum's gonna get her cleaver. He got the better of me and pinned me down. Well, Terry said, thoughtfully from where he sat, undisturbed by the ruckus, we could take him to the house. In an instant, all levity drained from Tom, and he stood facing his brother. You serious? Last time we agreed there was no way we would ever go back there. Terry shrugged. I know, but we wouldn't have to go inside, just show him where it is. Wait, I sat up. I thought the witch's house burned down. It did, Terry nodded, but there was still a few walls standing where it was. You would at least know where we were telling the truth about that. No way, Terry. Tom shook his head furiously. No way. It was the fact the older take-charge Tom was so obviously terrified that made up my mind. All right, I'm in. When are we going? Now? You're crazy.
Time to assert your alpha dominance. Good job.
Now that I saw Tom was a bitch, and I could be the man. You're crazy, Tom whispered. Terry shook his head. We'd never find it in the dark, and even if we could, you wouldn't be able to see anything. We'll go tomorrow. Crazy, Tom whispered again. All right, I said. Can't wait. With that, it was obvious that the night's fun had come to an end. I doused the fire, and we all got into our sleeping bags. Before long, I could hear Terry gently snoring from across the tent, but I'm pretty sure Tom was still awake when I finally nodded off. The next morning, we packed up the camping equipment. Tom was quiet and sullen, but Terry and I agreed that after I went home for breakfast and a change, I'd meet the brothers back at their house. When I unlocked the front door of the duplex and pushed inside, I was surprised to find my mom sitting at the kitchen table on the phone. Mom, is everything okay? Why aren't you at work? She smiled at me, but seemed a little shaky. Everything's fine, honey. I called your dad about some things, and we got to talking, so I'm going in a little late today. Did you have fun with the boys? I frowned. Yeah, I'm meeting them again in a little bit. Just home to change.
I like that sentence. Did you have fun? I frowned. Yeah, I'm going back over there.
Yeah, god damn it. It was fun. Fuck. Okay, hon, sounds good. I'll tell Dad you said hi. Okay. I walked down the hall to my room, but kept the door cracked so I could try to listen to my mom's conversation. I couldn't hear much, but I could tell from her tone that she was agitated. After a couple seconds, I decided it was none of my business and shut the door. I got dressed and headed back through the kitchen. Bye, Mom. Love you. Tell Dad I love him too. Okay, honey. She nodded absently. Have a good day. You too. I picked my bike up from the lawn and headed to meet the brothers, my mom's conversation rolling around in my head. Terry met me outside. Ready to go? You'll want to leave your bike here. You'd have to walk it most of the way through the woods. He frowned, looking at my face. Everything okay? Huh? Oh, yeah. It was just weird. My mom was late to work and seemed upset. She was talking to my dad on the phone, so probably not anything I can do about it. I craned my neck.
This is like the most grounded kid in his parents' relationship.
Yeah.
Ever.
I kind of, this was very, my parents were divorced when I was a kid. It was a lot like that, where it was just sort of like, this is just sort of like, that is something I think isn't captured a lot in fiction, whether it's like movies or stories or whatever. Like children of divorce, it's not usually so dramatic. Like stuff just sort of happens a lot around you.
I've seen enough TV and movies, Ben, that every kid, all they think about 100% of the time is how it's their fault.
Yeah.
That mom and dad are divorced and how they're going to get them back together. Which, not to make fun of, I know that, different people that, I'm sure there's kids out there, plenty of them that do take it hard like that. But yeah, like you said, I think it's completely ignored the number of kids that are just like, that's just how,
it's just one more part of your life growing up that's uncomfortable, but it's not, there's not like huge blow-ups about it a lot of the time. But like you said, everybody deals with it differently. But I do like that this kid's just sort of like, shit's fucked up. Where's this house? Because that's how I would be.
He frowned. I can't wait to go to the house.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why, clearly his, emotions are just all, they don't work.
Yeah.
Did you have fun? I frowned. Yes.
It was
the best day of my life.
When I was 13, that's how I felt about everything. It was like, it was good times. Fuck. God damn it. I craned my neck to look behind him into the house. Where's Tom? He's still steamed that we're going to the witch's house. Really? How come? Terry shrugged. We had a bad experience last time we went there. I looked at him, waiting for more. And you're both crazy for wanting to go to that house. Tom pushed his way through the screen door onto the stoop, but there's no way I'm letting you go alone. Terry smiled tightly.
Hero. He took over the alpha spot again.
I mean, that is older brother shit.
I'm the older brother. I would have been like, good fucking luck.
Well, my older brother wouldn't do that either. But I do see there is a type of older brother out there who would look out.
Theoretical older brother, yeah. The one from Goonies that chased him down the street on a tricycle.
One out of every 10 brothers gives a fuck. Terry smiled tightly. Come on, Sam. He walked around to the backyard and into the adjoining woods. We stepped onto an overgrown trail and followed it for 100 yards or so before it faded completely, and we were left walking through what was, as near as I could tell, completely unmarked forest. I followed Terry closely, Tom lagging behind us. The question still burning in my mind after 10 minutes of walking through the trees, I asked again. Seriously, why is he so worked up? Well, Terry turned to make sure Tom wasn't close enough to hear then lowered his voice. The truth is, we think the Cleaves killed our mom. What? That's crazy. Terry pushed a low-hanging branch out of his path. Yeah, I know we told you she died a couple years ago. It happened suddenly, the day after the last time we went to the witch's house. The next morning when my dad came home from work, he found her dead in their room. He paused to take a long step across the shallow creek. Not long after we found she had been cheating on him, one of our neighbors was found dead in his bed too. Both of their heads were chopped off.
That's a hell of a thing to hide.
That's the detail that's like, this is either completely true or your dad fucking murdered
It's how we got away with it. Like, the police showed up, they're like, oh, we always have to talk to the husband, first subject, especially when we know she's been cheating on you. It's like,
It's kind of crazy that they were able to keep that detail under wraps until this story, though.
Especially, like, the earlier detail where it's like, oh, I ran into these kids and we never met before, but we became good friends. And I almost said something about, like, but I thought this was like this small, like, It's a Wonderful Life town. Like, part of that is everybody knows everybody. But I wrote that off as, like, he just moved there. You know, you obviously don't move in and, like, have a meet and greet.
So you know the people in town who don't have a neck, so they're not good to decapitate.
If there's one other child in that town and you start hanging out with these kids, the other kid's going to come up to you and be like, their mom's head got cut off. Like, that's just how it works.
Yeah. But yeah, props to Tom and Terry for keeping that shit hush-hush until one curious idiot asked you enough questions. It's like you're asked twice and you spill the beans.
That's the funny part, too. It wasn't even that insistent. It's like, oh, what was it? And like, oh, it was just terrible. They're like, oh. Can you elaborate? They're like, well, you twisted our arms.
It's Will Ferrell's character in Austin Powers. It was like, how'd your mom die? Where did I leave this? The next morning when my dad came, he found her dead in the room. Both their heads chopped off. Okay. That's a weird thing to read quick, but I stumbled in surprise, my foot getting soaked in the creek up to the ankle. You have to be messing with me. You're kidding, right? No, it's true. You can ask other people about it. But the cops must have thought your dad did it. Terry nodded.
Hey, good for him.
Of course. But his manager and all the other guys at the mill swore that he'd been there all night. And the doctor put the time of both deaths right in the middle of Dad's shift. I glanced back at Tom. No way, you're pulling my leg. Tom was joking about the whole Mum Cleaver thing last night before you suggested going to the house. Terry shrugged. That's just how he handles things. Laughs it off so he doesn't have to think too hard about it. What about you? If you really believe old Mother Cleaver killed your mom, how come you're so ready to go traipsing around her house?
I want my revenge, damn it.
Yeah. Terry's normally kind eyes grew hard. My mom wasn't perfect, but that doesn't mean she deserved to have her head chopped off. I need to see if the Cleaves is really real. If she is, she owes me. Tom and my dad, too. I shook my head in wonder. Why'd you wait 2 years to go back, then? Because I'm scared as hell. Terry grinned, and I figured Tom wouldn't let me go without him. Especially if you were going. I stopped talking for a few minutes, just processing everything Terry had laid on me.
Why didn't you tell me sooner? I would have brought my assault rifle.
Yeah, why did we? If this was a revenge plot, I could have at least brought weaponry.
I assume we'll find something there.
Instead, we're just going to fucking peek in the windows and get killed. I stopped talking for a few minutes, just processing everything Terry had laid on me. One final question nagged me. Okay, assuming your dad didn't do it, that still doesn't explain why you think old Mother Cleaver killed your mom. Maybe it was just some escaped maniac or something. That would be a stretch, but a lot more believable than some ancient witch hiding under the bed. Terry nodded.
Well, in fairness, everything's more believable than an ancient witch hiding under a bed. Yeah. Like, that's the last thing on the believability list.
Yeah. I mean, I would, well, what about, like, the wife of the neighbor?
Right.
But then again, she could be a witch.
Even the kids. I mean, you can turn on the Crime Channel and find all sorts of TV shows about kids that, like,
Tom and Terry wouldn't do that shit.
I could see him doing. They'd have one of those, like, two-person saws, like lumberjacks use. They're on either side of them. Like, how dare you threaten to break up our family by cheating on Dad? And then they go get the other guy. Like, that's totally...
Sure. But wouldn't be a good creepypasta if it was just... It's like, nah, we killed her. We're just joshing.
Well, I don't know. You admit that once you've got this guy deep in the woods and it's just the three of you, that gets kind of...
Yeah.
Like, oh... We had to tell somebody, but nobody else can know. And then they whip out that two-person saw that they had somehow hiding in their pocket. Or he's like, I wondered why you were carrying that thing with you.
Terry nodded. Oh. The last time Tom and I went to the house, I took something. That night, the night she died, my mom woke me up and asked me about it. At least I thought it was her. I told the truth, said I was sorry. She kissed me on the forehead and left. I shivered, just like, yeah. Thing is, we didn't know this was her house. We really didn't know anything about old Mother Cleaver then, just the rhyme. Most people don't. It wasn't until later my dad told us the whole story. That's when we realized what must have happened. And he knows the story because his great-great-grandmother was the mayor's wife who died. No way. Just what my dad told us. We're almost there. We walked maybe another 50 yards before Terry pushed through a thick screen of brush. Before us, the burned-out remains of an old wooden house stood in the clearing. Only 2 of the exterior walls were still erect, and the roof was collapsed. The bare interior house totally exposed to the elements. The 2 of us stopped, just looking. Well... The
witch was on the shitter. She looked up. A little privacy, please?
Hey. You can't just come to somebody's house when they're taking a dump, okay? Well, here it is, Tom said, coming up behind us. You believe us now, Sam? Can we get the heck out of here, please? Seeing the remains of the house, its blackened timbers twisting this way and that like broken fingers, I felt an involuntary shiver creep down my spine. Works for me, I said. I sure hope you guys know how to find your way back. In a minute, Terry said before abruptly jogging forward and ducking behind one of the still-standing walls of the house. Terry! Tom shouted. He took a step to follow, then stopped, hands clenched at his side, frustration visible on his face. What are you doing? I called after Terry. I followed him, but rounding the wall, my mouth dropped open, dumbfounded. Whoa, where did he go? With visible effort, Tom came to stand beside me. There's a hole over there. You can't really see it, but it leads down to the cellar. Come on.
I like the with visible effort, as if, like, people normally just, like, glide around effortlessly. Like,
he floated to my side.
Yes?
You sure? I asked. Terry told me about, your mom. He sighed. I figured. And no, I'm not. But somebody's got to make sure that idiot doesn't hurt himself. There's no light down there. Sure enough, not 20 feet from where I stood lay an open hole with a shaky-looking ladder leading down it, blocked from sight by some of the fallen roof. Terry went down. Yeah? What is he doing? Being an idiot? Tom shook his head. We found this place a few years ago. Didn't have any idea what it was. We came a bunch of times, but it was only our last trip we found the cellar. We poked around and found all things, an old rotted skeleton. Terry took one of the finger's bones as a souvenir. All right, Terry's fucking weird. That's a weird thing to like. I want to keep a part of it.
Well, I mean, if you're going to keep a part of it, you keep the skull. I mean...
Yeah, the finger. What's he doing? Just sucking on it? Fucking weird. And that's why you think old Mother Cleaver visited you that night to get the finger back. But why did she kill your mom? Tom shrugged. Don't know. Maybe since we disturbed her, she decided to go back to her old tricks. But that finger was gone the next morning. Come on, I'll go first. He took a breath to settle his nerves, then descended the ladder. You're good, he called back up. Careful, some of the rungs are a bit slippery. I cautiously made my way down to the cellar beside Tom and found the light coming from the hole above did little to illuminate the space. Here.
So, the 2 brothers that had been here before decided to return without weapons or a flashlight. Like, their leadership skills are in question. I think you turn around to go home.
Here, Tom said, put your hand on my shoulder so we don't lose each other. I think I can remember how to get to where we found the skeleton. I grabbed his shirt and we stepped into the blackness. Within only a few steps, it was absolute. It didn't take long, maybe only 30 seconds or so, but the time seemed to stretch on for eternity as Tom carefully felt his way along the earthen wall, and I clutched his shoulder. We took one turn, then another, before the light of a small flashlight showed where Terry was stooped over, kneeling on the ground. "You butthole," Tom called, striding up to his brother and roughly jerking him to his feet, the flashlight falling out of Terry's hands. "What the heck are you doing?" I stepped closer but stayed out of the brother's way. The flashlight rested on a pile of ancient yellow bones. "Get off me!" Terry shoved Tom's hand away. "You know what I'm doing." "Yeah, steal another bone and the Cleaves will come to take it, right? Then what?" Terry was practically crying. "Then I'll make her tell me why she killed Mom." "How's that going
Obviously,
to work?
your mom lied about the affair. I mean, it's... How did you put everything else together, but not that?
Yeah. "How's that going to work, idiot? You're going to be asleep when she comes. What if you mess up and lie to her, huh? What then? She'll chop your head off, too." Tears were swelling from Tom's eyes now as well. "Then you do it, dipshit. I'm not crazy." "No, you're just a fucking coward." "I'll do it," I said softly. "What?" The brothers stopped, turning to me in unison. In their defense, both tried to talk me out of it, but I was resolved. Part of it was that I still wasn't completely sure this wasn't just some enormously elaborate prank that the brothers had decided to pull on me. Partly I wanted to see if the legend was true, but the main reason I ill-advisedly took a small finger bone from the witch's burnout cellar was I wanted to help my new friends. Walking back to their house, we came up with our plan. We discussed if it made more sense for me to stay with them that night, but decided I'd have to stay in my room to make sure old Mother Cleaver would come. Tom and Terry had never heard of anyone being killed in a bed other than their own, and if there was going to be a confrontation, we wanted to be sure we were ready for it. We decided that after their dad left for work that night, the boys would come over and hide in my yard. We spent a lot of time discussing if we should rig some kind of booby traps, but ultimately ruled against anything that might make the Cleaves decide to wait and come another night. Tom had a heavy practice bat he would bring, and Terry was a deadeye with his wrist slingshot. This is how we're going to take on a ghost. All right.
Yeah, I say again, I'm questioning their...
I mean, you know, it was a lot of work to get this finger. We didn't have time to prep the plan part 2.
Although, did it... I feel like it said he was like 8 or something. Did it?
He's 13.
Oh, well, fuck. That's way too old. You should be way better prepared at 13. Yeah.
Steak knife is better.
Yeah, I mean, fuck. Lighter with... At that point, we would have had, like... Now, none of our weapons would probably work, but we would have rigged some, like, hairspray flamethrower thing, and... Like, by 13, we were doing all sorts of dangerous shit.
I'd go to bed around 11, same as always, the bone resting on my nightstand. After that, we would simply see what happened. I had always been honest growing up. My dad had been sure to instill that in me, but I was still a little nervous how I would respond half asleep. The rest of the day was a blur. Finally, it was time to go home. I ate dinner with my mom after she finally got home from work, and if she noticed I was unusually quiet, she didn't say anything. It seemed
she was distracted by the phone call, so...
Yeah.
Good plot setting up there.
Yeah, she's in her own world. Divorcee.
Swimming shadow.
Yeah. It seemed like she had a lot on her mind, too. I sat next to her on the couch and watched TV for a while, though I wasn't really paying attention, until at last the wall clock said it was about time for bed. I stooped over to give her a hug and abruptly felt tears spring to my eyes as I realized this could be the last time I saw her. What the hell had I been thinking earlier? Why had I agreed to do this? The bone, suddenly extremely heavy in my pocket, reminded me it was too late to back out now. Old Mother Cleaver, if she was real, would be coming either way. "I love you, Mom," I said softly. "I love you too, baby." She smiled. "Sleep tight." I went to my room to change, brushed my teeth, and put the bone on the nightstand. I eyed the dark space beneath the bed, forcibly willing myself not to look. Was the Cleaves already there, waiting for me to go to sleep? I moved to the open window and saw a light flash twice. The signal Tom and Terry were in position with a fucking slingshot. Now all we needed was for me to fall asleep. I don't know how long I lay there in my bed that night. I'd been worried with the fear and excitement I wouldn't be able to nod off, but next thing I knew I was startled awake when a heavy weight settled next to me on my mattress. Shh, it's okay, honey, it's okay. My mom shushed. I just want to check on you. Sorry I was distracted tonight. You okay? You seemed a little off at dinner. My heart leapt into my throat before I confirmed that it was in fact my mother. It was dark in my room, but there was enough light streaming through the window from the moon that I could tell it was her. Certainly not an enraged witch readying to chop my head off. I'm okay. Mom, you seemed weird too. Is it something with Dad? She shook her head. No, we're fine. We still don't know what we're going to do permanently, but it's work that's distracting me. Nothing you can help with, honey. Go back to sleep. Sorry to disturb you. She gently stroked my hair. It's okay. Mom, love you. She sat there for several long minutes, softly caressing my head. My breathing slowed, and it wasn't until I was again on the verge of sleep that she finally stood up to leave. Sam, her voice sounded far away. What's this on your nightstand? Sorry, Mom, I breathed. It's to help Tom and Terry. That's my good boy. She bent over and kissed my forehead. It was a long beat before my brain processed what had just happened. My eyes snapped open and I shot up in bed, a pulse of fear coursing through me. I was alone in the room. I rushed to the window, but other than 2 flashes of light confirming the brothers were still outside waiting, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The rest of the house was dark and quiet, and I carefully confirmed that my mother was asleep in her bed. Maybe it had been a dream brought on by an overactive imagination. Maybe. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning I checked with Tom and Terry. They had taken shifts to ensure one would always be awake, but neither had spied anything strange. I relayed what had happened, and they were as dumbfounded as me. Little did I know that would be one of the very last times I would see the brothers. While I was outside talking to them, my mom got another phone call. I learned later that the judge she worked for at the courthouse had been taking bribes. My mom had found out and been trying to figure out what to do about it. Ultimately, she didn't have to decide because the judge was found murdered. Rumor was his head had been chopped off. We moved town shortly after that. My parents ended up getting divorced, but I got to see my dad regularly, and they both seemed happier for it, so that was okay. I stayed in touch with Tom and Terry through mail for a while, but eventually we fell out of contact. With the internet and social media today, I've thought many times about trying to track them down, but I haven't. I don't know if they ever managed to confront old Mom. Frankly, I'm scared to find out if they did. The world I grew up in was different, more isolated. If a judge mysteriously had his head cut off today, it would be making headlines the world over. But that was then. This is a true story. I don't care if you believe me, because I know it is in my gut. I know because ever since that night, I've made it a point to be utterly truthful in everything I've said and done, lying to no one, including myself, because I've still got that finger bone. Why she took Tom and Terry's all those years ago and left mine, I can't fathom. But if the night comes that old Mother Cleaver sneaks out from under my bed and asks me about my sins, ready to deliver her unique brand of justice, I want to be sure I answer honestly. The end.
I like that one a lot better than the other.
That's a really good story. I'm not saying that to
be like,
flip it. Like that, I like that one a lot. By the end of it, I was totally into it. Albeit I haven't eaten all day, so I'm also like shaking and sweating, and so I was just trying to focus and get through it and not pass out. But
and I will say, and it's something that, and I bring this up, and we say this every fucking time we bring something up, because it's something I am super, super guilty of, and basically every creepypasta out there seems to be guilty of. But the first, probably page of the story where it's talking about like, oh, mom and dad got separated and we moved and mom went to this kind of town and this and blah, blah. You could cut all that out. Like we tend to go into way too much backstory.
Yeah.
Because there was little details there that I know that you're trying to plant, but you can plant those in like single sentence.
I mean, you know me, and like we've done these creepypastas a lot. I always err on the side of brevity. Like, I like things to be kind of shown, not told, and shown not told.
See, we're writer people.
Dude,
we're wordsmiths.
I'm really like, I need to wrap this shit up. But I do like a shorter, kind of more less is more story most of the time. This was far from the worst example of padding that we've done, though. No. Like, I thought actually they did a really good job kind of making a very simple kids trying to bust an urban legend story, and he or she gave it a lot of depth.
What I really, really love is how it's got kind of one of those open endings, but it's not a cliche open ending in my opinion. At least it didn't feel like it to me. Like, it's not it's I forget what they call it, but it's basically like the nothing changes ending, where it's like you get this dramatic moment where you realize that he's talking to the witch, and then he realizes that after the fact they don't catch her. Like, I was half expecting the kids to be like slaughtered in the yard or something. Yeah. But then it's just like, well, it leaves you wondering, like, did the brothers just decide they're not going to tempt fate? Did they try again after they moved? I do love this idea, though, that the witch is basically in slumber until somebody disturbs her. And then she's like, well, fuck it. While I'm in town, I'm just going to go around and look for liars. Yeah. Like these people were lying and cheating all along. It wasn't until they got her out of her house and she's like, oh fuck, I'm just gonna make one trip. If I'm here, I'm gonna take care of all my business. The other thing I liked is that it gave us, like, I didn't think about this soon enough to get enough of them, but it gave me like a whole like fake album. You know, we made the joke about Youthful Eden sounding like a band, so I kept that as a band name. The album name is Heavy Bone in My Pocket, because that appeared there, and that sounds like a very like metal album to me. And then it had the line, he tells the truth when he's drunk. I'm like, oh, that's a fucking song title.
Yeah.
And then ended with, I still got that finger bone. Like, that's also a metal title. And I wish I would have paid attention more, because I think I could have had a whole album out of this story.
Yeah. I do think they have a pretty solid poetic writing style that popped out a few times there, too. That was the thing. Like, my biggest gripe with that last one was pacing. And I thought this was way, way better paced. And...
yeah, kind of, like I said, I felt like it kind of started off going that way, but then once it got to the point, which it did relatively early, and then it moved. The other story's problem was it took forever to like really get to the point, but then the point was extremely kind of weak, so there was no... It never climax. You know, a story's supposed to have a climax. And I guess the other one I remember, it had like I started noticing these creatures up in the trees and these like bodies hanging, and then I left. And you're like, what? Yeah. Okay. Like, I mean, I get that feeling. And so we've all been there where you like get invited to a party and you walk in and you're like, nope, don't like this vibe. And you leave. But that doesn't make for a good story.
Grandpa Simpson's gif where he hangs up his coat and then grabs his coat. I liked it. That's a good story.
And I think the most telling thing, and we'll wrap this up because I know you need to, but is that we're closing in, and we didn't have a lot of like chit chat at the beginning, a little bit like normal, but it's almost an hour-long episode, and it doesn't feel like that to me. Like, it wasn't a story that drug on for an hour. It
only feels that way because I'm a very unhealthy person, and I need to start actually eating lunches. It turns out.
I've had that problem all week.
Because I'm like shaking. And this is bad. Bad news. Thanks for listening to the show. If I'm dead by next week, thanks for, it's been a fun run. So goodbye, and hopefully I'll make it.
Oh, I can sense the fear in your voice. I hope I'll be back. But if not,
I actually feel genuinely shitty. This is weird.
Yeah.
It's that vaccine. Don't get the booster. Run. No, get the booster. Fuck off. All right. Bye.